Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Max is right, Brad. You have to open this one. This is you've been the retired 91. You've been the Fedorov champion for the lifetime of this podcast. This is you.
That's a risky proposition because there's a non-zero chance that if I do a dialogue here, it's going to be 13 minutes on his skates alone. So I will just start by saying it's about time.
Brother, don't threaten me with a good time. The whole episode should be about those skates. We should talk about Sergei Fedorov being one of the most underappreciated two-way players of all time last. And we should more talk about the fact that he has maybe the greatest level of hockey drip in NHL history.
The style god.
Honestly.
I mean, the gif of him at the All-Star game got as much usage today as it ever has, and it was pretty good. I mean, this is a little before my, I was alive, but I wasn't really locked in for a lot of that era. I was very young. So it was fun to see some of it come across the timeline, and it's not that I've never seen it before, but just in full force. It was maximum impact, I would say.
It was a good reminder of all the videos today. You could make a case, a coherent argument. Sergei Fedorov was the first guy to play modern hockey. If you look at players and the way the game's played today, and then you just travel back in time and keep going until you see a guy who's like, okay, this is where it started. It was him, where style was a huge priority, or the sty, as the kids would say, but the high-skilled, high-compete, 200-foot can do it all, but smooth, speed, pace. He was the OG, can do it all with finesse.
Him with a capital H.
The year that he won the Selke and the Hart, Brad, I'll let you talk about the actual season itself. But to me, that I have a foundational belief that should be happening much more often in the modern NHL. And I don't know if it's because people like Sergei Fedorov and Pavel Datsyuk kind of set that bar, right? And I grew up in Grand Rapids. And so I kind of have this idea of, hey, what? Yeah, just because you're the best defensive forward in the league, why can't you also be one of the most exciting players in the league? But I do feel 100% agree with you about the modern NHL. He was kind of a foreshadowing of where the game was going. But I also think he's maybe a little bit of a reminder of hey guys, we don't do this enough anymore. We don't give guys like Barkov quite enough due in this big vote as we might have in an era gone by when players like Fedorov and Datsyuk were showing you that you can be the best defensive forward, the best two-way forward. And yeah, by the way, that kind of does make you the most valuable player in the league.
The 93-94 season, I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but from what I remember, he did not lead the league in scoring, and I don't think he was particularly close to first place in terms of points. I feel like it was Lemieux or Gretzky had a pretty sizable lead on him, but just because of his impacts everywhere else on the ice, people are like, okay, if this dude can put up 120 points or whatever it was, while also being the most important player in his own end, what more could you want? And it's probably relevant because, there's always a good storyline that goes with most MVPs. The Red Wings were the team on the rise at the time, right? They were the dead things throughout the entire 80s. And then in the early 90s, it's all right, here we go. Obviously, the new guard arrives. Fedorov, Lidstrom, Konstantinov, et cetera, and he was at the forefront of that. So had the storyline, had the defensive metrics. But the thing is, the offense wasn't just good, it was ridiculous. I can't see a forward nowadays winning an MVP with 80 points. If McDavid puts up 140 and then Barkov puts up 115, okay, we're probably having that conversation. But it's not just that he was plus offensively.
Oh, he was 120 points. I get it.
Yeah, he was elite offensively and he was elite defensively. You could go on for hours and hours about all the things. I don't think it was that season. I think shortly after that, the Red Wings went through a series of injuries, just a comical amount of injuries. Scotty Bowman put him on defense and said he was the team's best defenseman. Could you imagine Dylan Larkin trying a shift at defense in the NHL these days? And that's not a knock on Larkin.
Well, not to mention who happened to be on the team at defense. Only a top 3 defenseman in NHL history.
You can tell how excited we are by this and how much we yearn for the old days of the Red Wings, because we're like, 5 minutes into this and we haven't even formally announced.
Oh, they know. They know, Ryan. They don't live under rocks.
For the sake of it, Sergei Fedorov, his number 91 is officially going to the Rafters. The Detroit Red Wings announced it today. We're recording late night, August 19th. Max, you're a trooper, man, doing 2 late night episodes in just under, actually in 48 hours. And it's been a hell of a day. It's been a long time coming. So the whispers of this started pretty early in the process of the Red Wings planning their Centennial plans. This kind of thing was discussed, as always, with reporting, unless something is like triple confirmed. You don't necessarily go out there, but it was out there to the point where we were kind of waiting with bated breath. And the Red Wings media team, man, it was noticed. They pulled it off. Credit to them, not just for the incredibly impactful hype videos and the graphics that they always generate, just top-notch league best stuff. They did the Taylor
First
Swift
letter
style
every tweet.
Yeah, first letter of every tweet from 9:10 a.m. yesterday to 9:10 p.m. spelled the word 91. And you could kind of tell as those tweets were coming in throughout the day, it's like, are they just goofing off? These are kind of weird.
It was an unusual number of tweets for a mid-August day.
Yeah, cheeky. And then this morning, at 7 a.m., they accidentally posted and then deleted a hashtag retire91, which got everyone buzzing. And by that point, obviously everyone knew it was coming. So thrilling day. And I mean, what a way to celebrate the Centennial. Is the most long-awaited jersey retirement, not just in Red Wings history, but across the NHL right now. This is the one where you pull anyone who knows ball, so to speak, and they would say, yeah, Fedorov should be up there. Where do we want to start? I think maybe we talk about the story of why it took so long, because that is the context for all of this. Because, I was talking to my wife earlier. She's like, I'm excited you have off-season content, but a jersey retirement, it's a big deal, but emergency episode? And I was like, yes. For this one, yeah, I don't even feel like we're milking content on this one. There actually is a point to all of this.
There were a lot of people who worried and thought that the day might never come, even as obvious as it looks on paper, right? He is one of the greatest Red Wings. He's one of the greatest NHL players of all time. He's one of the most iconic Red Wings ever. But yeah, I mean, in 1997-98, the year after they win their first Stanley Cup that he was a huge part of, signs an offer sheet mid-season with the Carolina Hurricanes, did not have a contract yet, right? And the Red Wings have to match this front-loaded offer sheet. And, they do. He stays. He wins 2 more cups, right? In my opinion, that cements his legacy. But then he does leave again in free agency. Now, he leaves at, 32, 33, late enough in his career, right? Patrick Kane left the Blackhawks. It's not going to be acrimonious, I don't think, with Patrick Kane and the Blackhawks. But I think when you combine the two, right? You tried to leave after the first cup, or at least you signed an offer sheet and were prepared to leave after the first cup. You actually leave a few years later. There was a strain that I think people worried would mean this would never happen. And the amount of time that it took, I believe it's 17 years. I think that kind of, you see Lidstrom, his jersey goes up almost immediately, right? And those guys were drafted the same year. Lidstrom played longer. His jersey goes up almost immediately. And I do think that was rare. I do think that gets a little bit lost in the narrative, is that Lidstrom was the exception, right? I mean, when I first joined the beat in 2018-19, they retired a jersey that year. It was Red Kelly. Red Kelly waited a super long time, right? You can go look. You can look at Del Vecchio, Abel, Lindsay, Sawchuk. All of those guys did wait longer than Fedorov. And that does get lost here, right? Fedorov is technically, and this is shocking, but if you go look, I believe, fact check me if I'm wrong, I believe he's the 4th fastest jersey retirement in Red Wings history. But because you compare it to his contemporaries, right, Yzerman, Lidstrom, the other one is Gordie Howe, who was not his contemporary, the wait felt so long because he's just as big a part of that golden era as those guys were, right? And so, in my opinion, like the perfect time to do this for me would have been the last year at the Joe, right? Because he played at the Joe. That's where the moments were. There's a similar kind of historic feel to that kind of season. It didn't happen then, and then they did the Red Kelly number, and it was fair to wonder, is this ever going to happen? But I do think, and I think the timing of it during the Centennial, I do think really adds something because like it would have felt like a missing piece, I think, during the Centennial. To look up and you see a lot of the pieces of that era. Certainly there are other massive pieces of that era that are not represented in the rafters. But I don't think any quite as big as Sergei Fedorov, Brad.
No, and there's cases to be made for other players from that era, but the offer sheet saga did create one iconic moment from the past and one hilarious joke for the future, because the one thing we haven't pointed about the Carolina offer sheet in his jersey retirement is it's January 12th against the Carolina Hurricanes, which is a subtle jab, which I deeply respect. And two, one of my favorite goal calls of all time came from that season, Game 3 of the Cup Finals against Washington. Tied 1-1 late in the third. Fedorov scores an unreal goal. And I think it was Gary Thorne just yelling out, "That's why you pay him $1 billion."
So more context on the offer sheet. It wasn't just that it was an offer sheet. It was essentially and I mean, again, Carolina did this later in modern times, but it was a poison-pilled offer sheet for the Red Wings to match because they front-loaded this conference final bonus. It was like $12 million. That wasn't really a worry for the Hurricanes at the time. They weren't at risk of having to do that. And it was a $14 million signing bonus, a 6-year, $38 million. Like it was a ton of money to the point where he got paid $28 million in his first year. I mean, that season,
half year, right? Because he started with 20 games left. Yeah.
And like, we all love what happened in 98. So that's why that gets drowned out. And it wasn't just that it was all that money that it cost the Ilitches and, there was back-end financing and things going on. The owner of the Hurricanes at the time, Pete Karmanos and Mike Ilitch hated each other. They hated each other. And that went, there's just a deep kind of Detroit business hockey tie thing going on. Like at one point, it's alleged that Mike Ilitch evicted a major junior team that Karmanos owned from the Joe Louis Arena. And then Karmanos wanted to try to buy, the Whalers and move them into the Palace of Auburn Hills. And there's just this like never ending rivalry between the two. They really didn't like each other. And so for the Ilitches, it wasn't just that Fedorov signed the offer sheet and it cost him a ton of money. It's that I think part of it is allegedly who it came from. And that's probably why there was so much deep-seated resentment for all these years. Not resentment towards Fedorov from the Ilitches, but just like the whole situation.
Do you think that Tom Dundon, who is decidedly not Peter Karmanos and now owns the Hurricanes, is a little bit like, hey, man, what's the 50 cent? Like, what do you say fuck me for, right? Or do you think Tom Dundon, who has played the offer sheet game himself as an owner, kind of respects it?
You know what? I think he probably looks at that a little bit mortified because of the amount of money that the Red Wings had to pay to match it. He probably feels bad. Like he probably feels sick to his stomach at the idea of having to pay one guy $28 million of God's own dollars. There's no way he would ever do that.
That's what you guys pay Evan.
Well, didn't he just buy an NBA team? He's going to be paying 6 guys that next year.
Yeah, that's true.
So and going back to what Max said, there was kind of the worry for a long time that this would never happen because of wherever the truth lays in that story, because of just the way it all went down. It just left a sour taste in the organization's mouth. Now, I heard that pretty much as soon as Yzerman was in and settled that this was something that, he was in favor of and it was going to happen eventually. That was made difficult by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the geopolitical fallout after that, and then the expulsion of Russia from International Ice Hockey Federation events, which still hasn't been lifted. And, like this administration Obviously, things have softened in terms of Russia, so it's less of a taboo right now for big organizations to interact with them. But I do actually think this would have happened earlier if not for that. I think there was a want and a taste for that from the organization to kind of make this right and make the situation whole.
I think that's kind of my takeaway too, that you're kind of getting at here is like, there's a few things in life where there's never a perfect time for them, right? There's always like a reason or two. Maybe there's going to be a better time down the road. When to buy a house, when to have a kid, right? Like, but at some point, like you start taking stock, and you know, we talked about the Centennial season and looking up at the rafters, right? Like, at some point, you just have to look at the situation and go, like, Sergei Fedorov's number has to be retired, right? And I don't know. If you don't do it now, you can always do it next year, right? There is nothing actually about the Centennial that says everything has to be done by the Centennial. Your whole history has to be captured, at your 100 years. That's a little bit of a myth, right? But I do think like it would have been such a missed opportunity to go through this season and not have this day for this player. So to me, yeah, like maybe they're, like you're alluding to, maybe there are complications, maybe there are reasons that, certainly if you asked us a year or two ago, is this going to happen in the next 2 years? I don't know that I would have said yes. But they finally decided it's just got to happen. And I think it was obviously I think it's the right call. I think he's one of the great Red Wings in history. And I think it's going to make for a really cool night in January.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's where it ultimately lands. Like this had to happen. And it's like there's no longer an elephant in the room, and it feels like you get to celebrate that part of the history completely. And it's not like the Red Wings excluded Fedorov from all video celebrating the past or anything like that, but it just makes sense to see him up there. So I know we opened the episode by talking about him as a player, but like let's really dive into who he was as a player, because I think Red Wings fans know completely who Fedorov was. And maybe if you're a newer Red Wings fan and you haven't yet, go dive in, because he was more than just an offensive superstar. He was everything on the ice. Like if you take out, Wayne and Mario, he's up there with the best players year in, year out.
I mean, his story, if I told it to you and you didn't know it was true, you would tell me I was trying a little too hard to give a guy like a cool spy backstory to being one of the greatest players in the NHL, right? He's drafted during the tail end of the Cold War, right? He's this late pick, fourth round, I believe. It just so happens to be the greatest draft class in certainly Red Wings and quite possibly NHL history, right? As part of a class that also included Nicklas Lidstrom, Vladimir Konstantinov, Mike Sillinger, Bob Bugner, Dallas Drake. Like, it's this insane draft class of guys who had amazing NHL careers, multiple Hall of Famers. And it happens at a time, and the reason that he's a fourth round pick is because guys could not just freely go from the Soviet Union to the NHL. So he has to defect at the Goodwill Games. He has to sneak out and come to Detroit. And it's this massive moment for what is one of the great players in the world. I don't think there was any doubt that Sergei Fedorov was extremely talented. But it was a question of well, will you ever get him if you draft him? Or how long will you have to wait to get him? Scaled up versions of the same kind of questions we've talked about kind of in present day, but much steeper barricades than we've talked about with Matvei Michkov or Ivan Demidov, right? So that backstory colors so much of it, right? I right from the drop, he's this and again, this is before my time, but just reading it and watching, Keith Gave is the dominant source and also a amazing main character in the story of Sergei Fedorov. If you go watch the Russian 5 documentary, if it's the first thing you'd ever know about the Red Wings, you'd think this was the coolest, most international man of mystery guy in the world, Ryan.
If folks want to go back and listen, we had Keith Gave on the show, and he did a great, telling of the story of not just his involvement, but the entire saga of this and how wild it seemed. Like, Max isn't lying. It does seem like a spy espionage novel. It'd be great fiction, except it's reality.
So then on top of the backstory, he has to start playing hockey once he gets here, eventually. And with this story, this international man of mystery. We didn't even talk about what his like world junior and international track record was to that point, which was its own otherworldly experience. The guy comes out of the gate and he's everything you would expect and more. As a rookie, did not look out of place from day one, made the NHL all-rookie team, was just every bit as advertised. Like, could you imagine leaving the Soviet Union as it's crumbling? You're exiting the Cold War. You're defecting. Like, and just having to all of a sudden show up in this city and go, I have to play hockey now. How the hell do I even think about that? I just uprooted my entire life. And he's a rock star immediately. You can just see it. Again, like I said, the first quote unquote modern day player. Smooth, fast, dominant all over the ice, highlight reel like you wouldn't believe. Because, like, you know, there's certain things too. You talk about Datsyuk and Zetterberg in the modern era, and Datsyuk gets all the highlights because he was that guy. He had those crazy highlights, even though Zetterberg was every bit as productive. Fedorov was that guy in the 90s. He scored ugly goals, but man, did he have a lot of pretty ones. Just things the NHL hadn't seen before. The one thing I loved watching him do back in the day, it's super common now, but back then it wasn't, where he'd be bursting up the right side as a left-hand shot, and he'd get the defenseman to turn, and the defenseman will be reaching with the stick, and he taps it under the defenseman's stick, brings his stick to the middle, and snaps it in. He was the first guy to perfect that. And it was like jaw-dropping when he would be able to. It's like, wait, you mean all in one motion he's going under the triangle, reaching over the dude's stick, and then just picking a corner? And yeah, and then obviously this first few seasons leads up to the 93-94, which obviously culminates in a great story. But the thing is, the Red Wings were the team on the rise there, like we were talking about, but they started to get the reputation like the San Jose Sharks had not that long ago, because they were always really good. They never got the job done. Got to the Cup Finals, 94-95, the season after he wins MVP. Swept by the Devils. Set the all-time NHL wins record. 95-96, Fedorov at the forefront of that again. Upset in the third round by Colorado before it all culminates in 97. And the reason I get to that, anybody who's watched any of the documentaries, lived it, or anything about the 97 playoff run, you could have made a pretty damn coherent argument that he should have got the Conn Smythe. He had his fingerprints all over, not just the whole playoffs, but some of the biggest moments. He torched the Flyers in the finals. That fan base might still be having nightmares about him. Scored so many big goals in that conference final, revenge against Colorado. And that was what, the 42-year drought. So it seems like a big time frame. He's drafted in 89, defects shortly after, and then here we are 8 years later, and he's the main piece of the Red Wings winning a Stanley Cup and ending one of the longest droughts in the NHL at the time, if not the longest drought in the NHL at the time. Like, it's unbelievable. You said, like, if you wrote a movie about that, you'd be like, settle down,
Right.
man, you're trying too hard.
You can't do everything, right?
Oh, and then, by the way, you have the contract situation after that cup, the holdout, and then he's a rock star again, wins another cup. Like, come on now. What kind of bullshit novelist is coming up with this garbage and expects anybody to believe it?
And if you want to talk like history, right? Place in like sports history. We haven't even mentioned that, oh, by the way, in the timing of all this like major geopolitical history, shortly after that, the Red Wings around Fedorov assembled the first collection of 5 Russians to all play together, right? And that's a big deal, not just because it's 5 Russians in the NHL and Russians could come over, because the Russians had a kind of a specific style. They played as a 5-man unit. And you would see it when NHL teams played the Red Army team. But now an NHL team had one of these 5-man units. It's like in a movie when like, oh, I got one of the big bad guys like weapons or whatever, and now I have one, right? That's what it was. And the Red Wings had one of these units, and of course, that's such a big piece of the lore of the 97 Stanley Cup for sure. But also just like the Red Wings' place in hockey history. You know, they're an original 6 team. They've won so many Stanley Cups. They have iconic figures, Gordie Howe, Nicklas Lidstrom, right? the Russian Five is like one of the most significant storylines, collections of talent in NHL history. And Fedorov, I don't even want to say he was the centerpiece because there are a bunch of, Konstantinov was massive part of that. Igor Larionov, like you cannot talk about the Russian Five without him. But he was the best player of the five.
Which is, like you're saying there, Max, that's a high bar to clear. All of those guys. And Fedorov is still his game. Like, you don't have the Red Wings success. Like you both said, you don't have the Red Wings in the late 90s and early 2000s. I remember, like, after the contract dispute, and then just it never really was the same with the organization, but he was still with the team. But then when he turned down, a big bag of money in 2003 and left, which was actually another reason why it didn't go down so well with ownership, and retirement was delayed of his number. The identity of the team just felt like a big piece of the soul was missing. And that's not exactly a bold statement. I mean, they lost one of their best players. But we look back at those Red Wings, from 97 to 2013, and it really does feel like they should have won more cups than they did, which is rich because they won 4 of them in that time. And things like that, like Fedorov leaving, you couldn't replace him. It's not like he was just an accessory piece around Yzerman and Lidstrom. He was just as integral as anyone else.
Yeah, and like I said, I was young for that era. Like I have extremely vague memories of like the 2002 Cup run and stuff like that I was aware of, but it's no like I didn't know what an offer sheet was, certainly in 2003. I don't think I realized really until I got onto the beat in 2018 how central to like I don't know if I want to say like identity, the psyche, the pride of Red Wings fans that Fedorov was, because like I'm walking in and they're retiring Red Kelly's number. Certainly I was too young for Red Kelly's career, but I look him up. Oh, he's a Hall of Famer. I go sit in his living room. I see all the amazing things that he did. And I'm really excited to be, telling that story as they're retiring Red Kelly's number. All anyone wanted to talk about when they were retiring Red Kelly's number was Sergei Fedorov. Like, that is when I realized just how central and how important it was to this fan base that Fedorov be recognized. And like we've talked about all show, like it was not clear if that was an imminent thing, if that was an eventual thing, if that was an ever thing. And, for all the reasons that we've just talked about, like as we lay it out, now I completely understand why it was that important to them. And frankly, like, I think it was good that they retired Red Kelly's number when they did. Obviously, Red Kelly passed away like shortly after that. So they got that in just in time for Red Kelly to see it, to experience it. I think that was really powerful. But I do not think they could have retired another jersey until they got this one done. And they have some deserving players that are hanging out there. One just went into the Hall of Fame this year in Pavel Datsyuk, right? I don't think you could have done another one before Fedorov. That's how important to this fan base and to the way this fan base sees the franchise.
It's also a bit lost through time. And obviously, like, I wasn't old, but like I lived through the 90s Red Wings. I have memories of the 97 Cup, but you see complaints throughout the years about boring eras of the NHL, or the superstars of the league don't have personality. And obviously there's guys like the Tkachuks and all that who are helping that these days. But like, you look at McDavid and Crosby and McKinnon, and it's like, yeah, they're great hockey players. You love watching them, but they don't ever really enter the zeitgeist isn't the word, but like the mainstream attention. The 90s Red Wings were that team that people watched. They weren't the Devils of the era where it was like, yeah, they're really good, but they're boring, no personality, awful hockey to watch. Their goalie sees 6 shots a night. Like, the Red Wings, because of the Russian Five and other factors, were extremely interesting because they had their own kind of storyline with how they were succeeding. The rivalry with the Avalanche, they had, that going for them. And because of guys like Sergei Fedorov, and primarily Sergei Fedorov, they were the, it team of the 90s. It was, if you were a new hockey fan that didn't have a local team, you were going to be a Red Wings fan. Like, you look at the size of the fan base now, and obviously every original six team is going to have a huge fan base. But I would be super curious to see stats that show how many non-Michigan people are Red Wings fans because they grew up on the 90s Red Wings. Fedorov in the white skates, Darren McCarty beating the hell out of Claude Lemieux, the multiple Stanley Cups, the brawls with the Avalanche. Like, it's so weird to think about because the Red Wings have been the most irrelevant team in the NHL for the last decade. But for longer than a decade, they were the most relevant team in the NHL. And when you go into the, outside sphere of hockey that's looking in on hockey, Fedorov was the center of attention. He was the guy that people went, oh, that guy's it. That's him. To steal Ryan's awful quote from earlier. He's him. That's the guy. And, obviously we all laugh about that gif from the All-Star game that gets posted all the time. He knew what he was doing there. But the public loved it. The media loved it. The fans loved it. Non-hockey people.
We need more of that today, frankly, in the sport.
Yes, 1,000%. 1,000%. The term trendsetter means nothing nowadays, but like quite literally that was Sergei Fedorov at the height of his powers.
You mentioned, Max, like who could be up next for retirement. And I know people are going to be talking about that. Datsyuk, yes. Zetterberg, yes. And I think I do wonder if they thought about doing more than just Fedorov this year. And they kind of have an internal, they like guys to be in the Hall thing. And that complicates it with Zetterberg, who I think should already be in. I think a lot of Red Wings fans would say the same thing. He'll have to wait a little while based on how the Hall works, I think. Hopefully not too much longer. I've always been a guy who thinks Datsyuk and Zetterberg should go up together, but I do also see the merit to them getting their own days or even seasons to celebrate. I could see this kind of going in order, like Datsyuk's next. Now that they've done Fedorov, a Russian has come in and barring any massive geopolitical shift, which is almost likely at this point the way the world's going, you can now do Datsyuk. And then whether Zetterberg's at the same time or after, it's totally up to you. But I think that's who everyone is kind of picturing, rightly so, next.
I got two more that I'm curious about, though. I think both those guys have to be locks, personally, for me, at some point. And the Red Wings, like, they have, whether they're like hard criteria or it's just like, hey, they don't want to do this willy-nilly, right? Like, you go to Toronto and you see all the numbers around there and you're like, this is a little much, right? Like, I think there is something to be said for being really choosy with how many, when, how frequently that you do this. So I know that as I say this. Osgood is another guy who I think the Hall of Fame thing becomes an obstacle for, but he was part of these cup teams too. And he was, I know people knock it because he was behind such a great team. He played the most minutes on all these teams because he was playing every minute of every game, Here's a sneaky one. Brendan Shanahan played.
That's a man after my own heart.
He does not have his number retired by any NHL team. He played he's a Hall of Famer. He played more seasons for the Red Wings than he played for everyone else. I think his issue is, only 9 seasons in Detroit doesn't really give you that much time to compile like the counting stats in Detroit. Like Shanahan as a Red Wing finishes, I believe he's 10th in points for the Red Wings, 9th for goals. Those are good. They're not Datsyuk, Zetterberg, Fedorov good. So that puts him a little behind the 8 ball, but he is in the Hall of Fame. He was if you go back and look at the 97, we can talk about all the storylines. Like one of the big ones, getting Brendan Shanahan, huge turning point for a team that couldn't get over the hump to add a guy with his blend of scoring and toughness. So I wouldn't put those two on the level of Datsyuk and Zetterberg, and I don't know that I would do them like I don't think you can do this many guys in like a 5-year window, right? Because the exclusivity is part of the honor. But while we're talking about jersey retirements, these are some things that are going through my head.
For me, and I'm Brendan Shanahan's my favorite player of all time. Broke my heart when I was a kid when he left. But I kind of agree with your point. I think he was too good for too many teams for too long. Like, not that any of them came close to what he did with the Red Wings, but I just think by the time he joined the Red Wings, a lot of people, depending on when they started watching hockey, would probably have considered him, more of a Devil or a Blue up until, really late in the game for the Red Wings in their heads. So I would like to see it, but at the same time, I set the standard for jersey retirement so high, like far higher than even the Hall of Fame, obviously. And if I'm iffy on Shanahan, then I think I'm definitely, I don't know that you do Osgood's. And I think that's tough because both those guys, like you said, were integral. And there's the case for Ozzy for the Hall, but even that's tenuous. Like I think if you poll non-Red Wings fans, it probably comes out at like what, 30 to 40% in favor.
It might be less among the general public, but I just think the reasoning that goes on with that can be a little, like, I don't know what the word for it is. It's not quite circular, but it's like, oh, because there was a good team in front of him, that means he's not worthy. But like, I look at some of the goalies that are in, like, Mike Vernon's a great goalie, but I think Chris Osgood has a better resume than Mike Vernon. So I'm sympathetic to the argument that wins are a team stat. But when you were the goalie for a team that won that much, I have a hard time. And I'm a kind of like I can be like a goalie agnostic person at times. But I think it's wrong to say the guy who plays the highest leverage position, that plays the most minutes of every game, is a passenger, or to imply that. Like, when they won that much and he was part of all the teams, like, Chris Osgood has been disrespected by the public in that way. It may be what the public thinks, but I don't think the public's right about that.
I could be talked into Osgood in the Hall one way or the other. But when Marc-Andre Fleury goes in first ballot, unanimous, there's no argument to not put Osgood in at that point. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Also, shout out Brad for the slight towards Martin Brodeur, saying he only faced 6 shots a night. He's furthering my campaign against, for some reason, I have this campaign against legendary French-Canadian goalies because everyone knows that I think Marc-Andre Fleury is wildly overrated. Martin Brodeur is an all-time great, but he is not number 1 and he is not number 2. And you're going to have to start making a case for number 3. And a lot of people treat him as the GOAT. And I'm just like, nah, you talk about teams who were solid in front of him. Martin Brodeur was able to play a long time in a lot of games per season, partly because of that. So
he's literally got a game 7, I believe game 7. It might have been a game 6, but I think it was a game 7 win against the Leafs where he literally faced 6 shots.
Who says
that
Evans
goes in
not
as
here?
A game 7 win on his resume and a shutout?
Who says Evans not here? The crusade and the war against the French-Canadian athletes carries on.
I do, Ryan, to your point about Datsyuk and Zetterberg, I think it's interesting, like, because there is this kind of like Euro Twins element to them that, like, it would feel right to if they both go up. Like, would you do them at the same time? But at the same time, like, it's so special. Like, why would you not want one in January and one in March, or one in November and one in February? And like, you get to do this celebration. I mean, I think one of people's complaints might be, give us wins to celebrate before you give us more history to celebrate. And I think that's valid. And I actually, like, there might be something to that. Like, maybe you have to wait until you're back in the playoffs before you do another one of these, so you don't seem like you're leaning too much on history. But, if that's the logic, then you're going to get to a same place that we got to with Fedorov, where you're like, why is it taking so long, right? So it's this hard to balance thing. It's the exclusivity versus the, like, inevitability, right? Like, I don't think any of us have any doubt that those two guys are getting up there at some point. But it's a matter of, is it in 2 years, or is it in 10 years, or is it in 20 years? Because for a lot of guys, it is 20 years. And I don't know that I realized that before this whole process.
You touched on it, and I think let's speak plainly here about it. Like, we talked about, it's a Centennial. It was long overdue. I mean, it's great that this now kind of proverbially opens the door for Fedorov to come back around the organization. Like, he's one of the only greats of that era where we don't really see him around the team a lot. Not necessarily because of this. He was doing his own thing, coaching and GMing in Russia. All those are awesome reasons. It's great to have Fedorov as part of the Centennial celebrations. Like, what a slam dunk that is. This is also a team that is probably really worried about another year of waning performance. They're going to need to sell tickets, and they're going to need to sell hype. And the improvements didn't really come in the offseason hand over fist. They got Gibson, and that's great, but it kind of remains to be seen what the rest adds up to. And, Hockeytown at center ice and Sergei Fedorov's 91 in the rafters. It's being called aura farming, which I think is funny as hell. And you can't really deny when people who are super cynical are like, well, they're just doing this to give the fans something to cheer for because this season, or there's not been a lot to cheer for in terms of performance. Because I don't really think until the Red Wings do it, until they get back to the playoffs, that you can go against that. So there is a business element to this too. And I think that's okay. Those things can exist at the same time.
I buy that for the Hockeytown thing. I don't buy it for Fedorov because, like we've all talked about, it's been so obvious forever that this has to happen. Like, maybe you can question the timing, right? But like, this had to happen at some point. I don't think the Fedorov thing is farming anything.
No, I'm not saying that's the only reason it happened.
No,
I'm just saying that's definitely a consideration. Like, it doesn't hurt.
It helps,
sure.
right? Like, I mean, you can definitely make the case that, like, this season is going to test the true power of the, like, fan home ice advantage, right? Because, like, how are you going to get outside of playoff games, how are you going to get your fans more excited than bringing back their traditions and raising the jersey of their heroes and having this Centennial season? Like, if they don't find a way to do it this year, like, the fans have done their part. You can't blame the energy in the crowd, as if you ever could, but you certainly can't if it doesn't happen with all this going on.
People who've been listening to this show for the last 10 and a half years will know that we didn't always think this way, but we have fully jumped the shark into just get into the damn playoffs again. Like, logic aside, whenever you can do it, even if it's by 1 point and then you lose the next 4 games by 1 billion cumulative goals, just let's see a Red Wings playoff hockey game at the LCA. That's how we felt before this. Now, with Fedorov in the rafters, Hockeytown back scrawled across center ice, we're all about the vibes on this show. That's the most important analytic, vibes per 60. It is demanded. It is needed. And something I'll say is that I don't want to be reductive when I talk about the business decisions of the Red Wings. Steve Yzerman is incredibly pathologically competitive. He wants to win. And that's not unique across GMs, but this guy hates to lose. You know this stuff, he knows this stuff matters to the fans. It does matter to the fans, and I don't think that's silly, but he wants the right season to come with this. And I think we all, like, if there's ever a year where you can just break through and pull it off, whether you call it a miracle or not, my God, do we need the playoffs this year?
No doubt. And you know, I don't think this adds pressure, because I don't think the pressure, frankly, could have been higher. Like, they've been outside the playoffs for 9 years. There's some time pressure, right? We've talked about it on the show enough times, right? Like, it's not that you have to win by a certain age that Dylan Larkin is. It's that if you don't find a way to compete while he's at a level that he could be your number one center, your path gets harder, right? Like, that pressure to me is very real. Alex DeBrincat's contract, he only has 2 years left on it all of a sudden after he was this massive acquisition 2 summers ago. You're feeling that clock ticking, right? Like, I don't think this adds any pressure to it or anything, but you did have a tweet earlier, Ryan, that was like, Hockeytown's back on the ice. Fedorov's going to the rafters. What more? You know, like what more do you need?
Maybe he can be the third pair defenseman we've been looking for. I think he could hang.
Worth a shot. He doesn't shoot right. That's the only, I mean, Brad, fact check that, but
first line left wing is available. It's
true.
He was good on defense,
true.
but I'm just saying, if we're going to maximize his powers, the hole is there.
Brad, are you ready for your 13 minutes on the white skates now? Wait, hold on. Is there a player in the league that you would allow to wear the white skates? Like, is this like can someone don the cape kind of thing?
Oh, that's a great question.
I got two when Brad's done.
So they have to meet criteria. They have to be really damn good. They have to be charismatic. And they've got to be really good looking. So, sorry, Tkachuk brothers, you're out. Oh, man. I've got a few I don't like the guy. Like, I like the guy, but like I don't like saying this because the Leafs thing. I can see Austin Matthews pulling this off.
That was one of mine.
Yeah, I could absolutely see Austin Matthews pulling this off. I feel like there's got to be a European out there that could do this.
Pettersson.
No. No.
You think Pettersson?
No.
Yes.
He's like,
Fedorov?
that would look like Tim Stützle with that stupid tinted visor. Some people can pull off a tinted visor. He is not one of them. And
the only knock against Pettersson is I do think you want to be fast if you're wearing those skates. But I think he's got like the fashion, like, you know, drip that he does. I didn't use that horribly.
I couldn't tell you a single thing about Pettersson other than JT Miller hates him. Yeah, okay, here's a dark horse one for you because he doesn't play like Fedorov did at all. But in terms of like swagger, skill, this whole like don't give a shit attitude, I could see Kucherov pulling this off.
Kucherov does have the swagger for it.
Yeah.
This guy's ruled out by your first criteria, unfortunately, but Daniel Sprong would have been a candidate too.
And Daniel Sprong would have done it. And I can tell you no one in that locker room would have been happy about it.
So here's the thing. The white skate thing this year, it's not as loud and as eccentric as the Nike skates were. But I got to tell you, the new Bauer Vapors have a lot of white. And these Vapors are always the most popular skate. So you're going to see a lot of guys trying to pull these off this year. And I got to say, I've seen them in action. They do look sick.
What about Cider, actually? The more
Cider's actually, dark horse, not a bad one for that. He's got good style. He's got that swagger about him, that aura
got the
about him.
hair.
Like, good
He's a little bit more
dude.
mild-mannered.
He can pull it
though.
off. The perfect answer just jumped in my head. There's two guys that are the most obvious answer for who could pull those off, and I can't believe none of us thought of them. Zegras, Pasternak.
Pasternak's really good.
Pasternak, yes. Zegras, no, for the same reason as Pettersson. Whatever the opposite of a dog is, that's what they are. They're puppies. You cannot.
But you know,
ironically, Ryan, the parlance, as I have learned by calling people a dog and people asking me which way do you mean that, the opposite of dog is dog. It's just how you say it.
We're certainly going to get into those verbal intricacies on this show, where we can't get Evan to commit to 2 pronunciations of a Swedish name in consecutive episodes.
Imagine my surprise at like 23, talking to hockey people and being like, "Oh yeah, Philip Hronek, like, you know, he's a dog," and they'll be like, like he dogs it, and I'm like, "No, like he's a dog." They're like, "Okay, a dog," and I'm like, "Yeah," but like you can use it interchangeably, which is terrifyingly confusing.
Going back very quickly to the numbers that they may choose to retire next, I don't think this will happen, but it's considered an unclosed loop, so I should acknowledge it. But Larry Ori's number 6 was, you know, technically the first number retired when Mike Ilitch bought the team. It was reissued into circulation, and there's still some of those who believe that that's a, you know, an unclosed controversy of some, you know, level. And I don't think that it's ever gonna go back up. Maybe you'll see a ceremony at some point for something, but yeah, I'm not really sure on that one.
Okay, so this is actually that's a good segue back to the conversation, because we brought up Shanahan, right? Like, people have been wearing 14. There's other jerseys out there that are not retired but not being used, right? Nobody's wearing 13. Nobody's wearing 40. Nobody's wearing 30, for that matter. People are wearing 14. Nobody's wearing 6, obviously, right? So that's an interesting wrinkle too.
Well, the nice thing about Fedorov's jerseys going up is what feels like every other year is Tavares or Stamkos going to sign with Detroit. What number are they going to wear? We don't have to worry about that anymore because they're just not going to sign here.
That's such a good point. The numbers retire themselves before they actually do. And I know some of that is internally, like there's guys like GMs or coaches saying, you're not wearing that number. Because some players are bold and they will ask. But a lot of the times they'll just know, yeah, I'm not going to get Hank's number. I'm not going to get number 40.
Well, like Tarasenko wore 91 before he came to Detroit. He didn't wear 91. So you kind of like, okay. So you can't wear 91. So it's kind of retired, right?
Anyhow, all this to say, this has been a fun, big ramble. You can tell Red Wings fandom is pumped about this. Like, it's cool. And like, again, the cynics, justified though they may be for being, you know, casting doubt on what the Red Wings are going to be able to do this season. It's a cool thing for the fan base to experience this. And the best time to do it was when it should have happened. And the second best time is now. And it's awesome that it happens in the Centennial season. That's going to be an incredibly fun night at the LCA. I can't wait for it on January 12th. I love the poetry of it all against Carolina. And yeah, the celebrations this season were already going to be fun. And I think that's just like, I know the Red Wings have more in store, but that's going to be a shining moment of it. So
what do you know?
Brad,
tell us.
Well, for the $6 that I gave you last episode back, maybe.
No, I need that.
Yeah, me too, man. Brad, your Retire 91 campaign has concluded. You may lay down your sword and shield. What's next? What's your next campaign?
Zetterberg to the Hall.
We can all get behind that one. Congratulations to Sergei Fedorov, to our good friend Peter online, who's been carrying that torch for a long time. Red Wings fans, it's cool. Thanks for tuning into this bonus episode. Max, The Athletic Detroit, thanks for jumping on. How'd the Tigers do?
They won on a Gleyber Torres walk-off walk in the 10th.
You're damn
Absolute
right.
scenes that I almost interrupted the show to tell you guys about 3 minutes in, but I figured we were rolling.
Oh, you should have done it. Detroit sports, man. All right.
And
Take
if you
care,
go
folks.
back and look, the Tigers tweeted over the last 6 hours, and the first letter of every tweet was Torres walk-off walk. Who could have guessed?
No, it's actually Gleyber walk-off walk. So that's funnier.
That's what it should have been.
Yeah. It's going to make a joke at someone else's expense swinging at a pitch they shouldn't have. That's not nice. That's not the vibe of this episode.
It actually happened, though. He struck out like right before that.
Yeah, that's on me. That's Detroit sports. We got to log off. Take care, folks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.
Going online without ExpressVPN is like driving a car without insurance. You might be a great driver, but with all those lunatics out there, why take the risk? Public Wi-Fi at airports, hotels, and cafes might seem convenient, but it's a goldmine for hackers. Anyone on the same network can potentially grab your personal info, passwords, banking logins, credit card details, with nothing more than just some basic tools and a bit of time. That's why ExpressVPN stands out. Their encryption is serious. We're talking so strong it would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to crack it. It's also super simple to use. Open the app, hit one button, and you're protected. And it works across all your devices, phones, tablets, laptops, whatever you're using. We personally started using ExpressVPN because we wanted to watch a hockey game that wasn't being broadcast in our area. It was geo-blocked, and the only way to get to it was through some sketchy website. ExpressVPN gave us secure access to the game and peace of mind knowing our connection was locked down the entire time. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wingedwheel. That's expressvpn.com/wingedwheel to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months free. expressvpn.com/wingedwheel. Back to school season is just around the corner, which means busy mornings, packed schedules, and way less time to think about what's for dinner. Instead of hitting the drive-thru, do what we've been doing and use Tempo, the convenient fix for quick, fresh, and actually good meals. With over 20 different options updated weekly, Tempo keeps you fueled and focused, all in less time than it takes to find your kid's backpack or to watch a lead disappear in a third-period meltdown. And these aren't bland microwave meals. We just tried the chicken cordon bleu and the filet mignon with twice-baked mashed potatoes. Both tasted like something we'd order at a restaurant, but they were on the table in just 3 minutes. Every meal is single-serve, portioned properly, and made with real ingredients you can pronounce. No mystery meat, no guilt, just food that fits into your life, whether you're at the rink, at work, or recording an episode. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. That's tempomeals.com/wingedwheel for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. Rules and restrictions may apply. Nobody plans for hair loss, just like nobody plans to be stuck in their own zone for a full 2 minutes. But when it happens, you need a game plan. Hims gives you access to personalized treatments so you can work toward thicker, fuller hair and start playing offense again. They use clinically proven ingredients that are like true top-line talent when it comes to slowing hair loss and regrowing hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Getting started is like lining up for the opening face-off, simple and straightforward. You fill out an online intake form, a licensed medical provider reviews it, and if prescribed, your treatment gets shipped right to your door. No road trips to a clinic, no long shifts in a waiting room. You can choose from chewables, oral medications, sprays, or serums. Basically, whatever fits into your daily lineup. And with no hidden fees or surprise costs, you know exactly what's on the scoreboard. If you're tired of not knowing what to do about hair loss and of my terrible hockey analogies, check out Hims. For simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/wingedwheel. That's hims.com/wingedwheel for your free online visit. hims.com/wingedwheel. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.